to me about why Italy is under so much pressure at the moment. The fundamentals haven't changed, and then the markets are focusing on Italy as a country which will be in trouble like the other peripheral countries.
Yeah, I mean, you were quite right. Fundamentals have not changed in any significant way, and this was also clearly stated by rating agencies. So we should not look at fundamentals as an explanation for what is going on in the market right now. I think that the focus is mostly on the fact that the government has actually been quite inactive over the last several months in terms of structural reforms for spurring growth potential, which is probably one of Italy's biggest concern. So I think this is mostly has to do with the political environment, and of course the external environment certainly does not help. The fact that the European policymakers cannot speak with one voice on how to involve the private sector in the Greek bailout, I think this is quite concerning, and this is creating an unfavorable environment
Marco,
for sovereign
I'm
risk.
a little bit concerned. We have the austerity measures, that's been passed through budget. It seems that the government, rightly or wrongly, has the situation under control, and we just had some breaking news. The Italian default swaps just rose to another record. How far are these default swaps going to rise before we get some kind of action, or I guess extra action, that is needed?
Actually, I think that the government has delivered quite significantly in terms of fiscal consolidation. The original austerity bill has been beefed up after recent market tensions. So I do not think that the government can really manage to do much more than what it has been doing over the last few hours. I think this is mostly related to what I was mentioning before, a very unfriendly environment for sovereign market. In this respect, I think that the S&P's warning on the state of health of the US sovereign is certainly not creating a favorable environment for sovereign risk. So I think this is entirely coming from the outside, at least from what concerns today's pressure, while Italy has actually strengthened the austerity measures.
And Marco, I understand that actually the pressure comes from outside, but unfortunately we've seemed to have had a similar situation, pressure coming from outside on Portuguese bonds, and also to a certain extent to Greece having to ask for a second bailout. At the end of the day, what are the chances of Italy having to ask for a bailout in the next year?
No, I think the chances are quite small. Let's not forget that in terms of fundamentals, Italy is placed much better than the countries you just mentioned. Just a couple numbers. Private sector indebtedness is not even comparable, for instance, with what we see in Portugal. So this means that the economy is not going through any kind of significant deleveraging process. The growth potential of Italy following the crisis was not significantly damaged, contrary to what happened, for instance, in Portugal. Italy certainly has a big problem, and that is weak labor productivity and a high stock of public debt. I think that a few well-targeted measures and reforms on the growth side are really what the market needs to regain some confidence.
What about the banks, Marco? Because, of course, we're expecting the stress tests. We have had reports of the last couple of days that some may be weaker than maybe analysts were hoping for. And, of course, if there are weak Italian banks, it also has a direct impact on French banks.
Well, Mr. Draghi has stated very clearly that he expects all Italian banks to successfully pass the stress test with a significant margin. So I have not much more to add on this. I would, yes, understand and acknowledge that in terms of capital ratios, Italian banks are probably somewhat below the rest of the Eurozone. But keep in mind that in terms of asset quality, particularly the fact that Italy was not exposed to a boom and bust in real estate. That is something that we should keep in mind when we assess asset quality of Italian banks. And certainly there is a problem in terms of corporate loans, because Italy's GDP growth is actually quite sluggish. But in terms of overall soundness of the banking sector, I would tend to remain quite relaxed.
All right, Marco, grazie. Marco Valli there from UniCredit.